Welcome to Momentum, a show where we break down the biggest issues facing women's sports, brought to you by Binge. I'm Kat Sasso, and each week I'll be joined by some of the biggest names in women's sport, athletes, experts, and trailblazers, as we dive deep into the world of women's sports. From the grassroots to the global stage, we'll explore the full spectrum of challenges, victories, and everything in between. This is your inside look at the real stories, the hard conversations, and the exciting momentum driving change. This week, I'm joined by Sydney FC forward Shea Connors. Some athletes make it look easy, but behind every highlight reel, there's a story of grit that you don't always see. Shea Connors knows that better than most. Before she was lighting up the A-League women's competition with Sydney FC, Shea faced a massive hurdle early in her career, compartment syndrome. At 18, she wasn't just fighting for minutes on the pitch, she was fighting to keep playing it all. What's so inspiring about Shea isn't just her comeback, it's the way she's embraced every challenge, moving countries, switching leagues, and backing herself every step of the way. Now, she's not only making her mark on the field, but building her voice off of it too, helping drive the conversation around women's football and athlete storytelling. Today, we dive into Shea's journey, the setbacks, the leaps of faith, and the lessons she's learned, chasing her passion around the world. Shea, I'm so excited to have you here. People might not know this, but me and Shea are besties in real life.
We are.
To kick things off, I want you to tell me where your story in football started.
Okay, so my story started probably when I was about 5. My mom signed my sister and I up to like this rec league just near our house. And yeah, so I started playing with my sister in the States, which was obviously like a huge football place.
And obviously you played college football. What was the difference in transitioning from the US soccer system to coming to Australia for you?
The transition, so first after college, I played in Iceland actually. Fun fact. For like fun fact. And that was like for 8 months, and then I came back to the States, and then I got the opportunity to come out here. The transition was obviously a bit difficult at first, like adjusting to a new country, but Australia was like warm and I loved it because I played like in New York winter, then Iceland, and I was like hating the cold. So then I came here and I was like, wow, it's amazing.
She's a Bondi local?
Bondi local. Back then I was in Brisbane. But yeah, so it was a good transition. I feel like Australia is like very like fast and like paced football, which is pretty similar and very physical, which I also that's the kind of style I play as well. So I feel like it was a transition in a way, but also I was able to fit in.
And at 18 years old, you battled compartment syndrome, which was such a huge challenge at such a young age. Can you take us back to that time?
Yeah, that was crazy. It was my freshman year of college. So I was actually playing a lot for a freshman. And I started having this like weird shin pain. They kept telling me it was shin splints. It was not. So finally, recurring issue in my life. But so they were telling me it wasn't. So finally I went and talked to the men's basketball physio, and he was like, oh shoot, we might need to go to the hospital. And I was like, oh, like for a test or something. They're like, yeah, pressure testing. And then I got the testing, and then they brought a doctor and I'm like, you're having surgery today. I was
That's
like,
insane.
yeah, he said he was gonna fillet my legs, which is no bedside manner he didn't have.
Yeah, no.
But I actually have like 4 like pretty big scars, but they had a plastic surgeon like clean them up. But
Okay.
and then I had 2 surgeries, so one to like drain because they swell. That's what happened. Like the fascia like pressure builds up, and then they obviously have to like release the pressure, so that's why the scars are there. But it was a really tough time. I was like in the hospital for like a month, then in like a wheelchair, and then basically had to like I had like no lower body strength, so then I had to build up from there. But I think it was a challenging time for me, but I think it shaped like who I am personally. And like I hadn't even thought about playing professional, but I think it just made like when they try to take something away from you, or even just like walking,
Mhm.
I feel like it gave me like a whole new perspective on life. I think that I needed.
Yeah.
And I was grateful for like a lot of the smaller things in my journey. Like I just wanted to train. Like practice wasn't like, oh, I'm going to practice. It was like, oh my God, I'm so grateful that I get to, do more than sit on the sidelines today.
Yeah, absolutely. And how did that affect you mentally?
That I think was a pivotal time for me. I think I was in like a dark place, but I luckily had a like really good support system. My friends and my mom was so great during that time. But I think it was a mental battle. Like as I think the mental was honestly harder than the physical. But then that's kind of really where I tapped into a bit of like self belief and self confidence. And there was this quote, like, "The fire inside me burns greater than the fire outside of me." I had it, like, printed out, and I actually think it's if you scroll down on my Instagram, I think, like,
It's somewhere there.
I
I
literally
love
posted it, like, on
that.
my thing when that, like, wasn't even a thing to, like, quote. This was, like, 2014, like, no one was, like, posting quotes on their thing, like, I wasn't an
With the
influencer back
Instagram
then. Yeah,
filters?
with a filter, I'm sure. I think it was, like, black writing as well, like, but I actually think, like, that mindset being like, "Okay, this sucks," like, right? But, like, I'm stronger than that, and I can
Mhm.
go places from this, and, like, this isn't, like, the end, obviously, but, like, being in a wheelchair, that's, like, it's, like, such a mind-boggling when, like, you love playing and, kind of, like, I was in college, a freshman in college, which is a really fun time, then I'm, like, not in school anymore because 'cause I'm literally in the hospital for a month.
Yeah.
Like, the picture that recently got, like, posted in, like, a media thing I did was, like, me with the Rockettes, like, the New York, I don't know if you know, they do those, like, kicks at the
Yeah.
Christmas show.
Yeah.
I turned to my mom and I said, "Wow, I must be down bad, like, they're visiting the sick
What
kids."
is happening
I was
right
like, "They're
now?
visiting me." But yeah, so it was a really interesting time, but I think it's definitely, like, helped me be, like, the strong person I am today.
Yeah, what was your recovery like?
So, the first, like, I had to actually go back home, and they had, like, a physio come to my house, so I had to learn literally how to, like, the calf strength. I basically had to learn how to walk again, and then basically from that, it actually wasn't as terrible as some recoveries, like, it was basically, like, as I grew stronger, I could continue to do things, so I think, like, actually within a month, I was actually back to standing,
Mhm.
like, because it happened around Thanksgiving, so by Christmas, like, a month later, I actually was standing for the first time. There was, like, a picture of me, like, I'm like, "Oh, standing," and I think, like, 2, 3 months later, I was, like, fully starting to jog, but it took, like, a lot of recovery, like, basically just building up my lower chain and then, getting back to it. And it was a good time, like, not a good time, but spring season is not like the competition side in the fall. It's like the fall year. So I
Mhm.
didn't miss any actual like season, but I didn't get to play in the spring games. But by the end like of like the spring term, I was back to training with everyone, which was
And
really
you
good.
you kind of touched on it already, but how did your mindset change towards training and playing and actually you weren't really a professional athlete at that
Yeah,
point,
for
but
sure.
how did it change your mindset to want to become a professional athlete?
Right. I feel like I realized first like how much I actually did care about the sport or how much I wanted for myself. And like there was a lot of time to reflect when you're stuck in a wheelchair at the hospital, you
Yeah.
know. But I think it made me a drive and then I was able to, watch a lot of like sports in my time. And then like I just like had this like inner drive where I was like, I want to be there. I'm gonna do whatever it takes to like make the most of it. Like I was like, I don't want to come back from this and just like be like another player. Like I wanna, you know what I'm saying? Like all I went through this for something. Like I'm gonna rebuild and I actually came back stronger. Like my strength coach in college, like Coach Rob, like he saw me every day in the gym, like because I could only do gym and like bike.
Yeah.
And I was like before training, after training, early in the morning before the other teams were in. And then I kind of was like, wow, I really, if I put myself like first in this and like commit to this, like I can actually make something out of it. And my coach, I remember saying, he was like, I always thought you're a good player, but after you had that injury, I was like, she had that drive. Like, I think she'll play professional. And I still have the screenshot from the text he sent me that day because he was like, you've got like a drive that like not everyone has,
Mhm. Yeah.
But I think, without that, like, would I've had that drive? I definitely have always been like a type A, like driven person. But I think that just made it like on steroids, like,
What was it like to have that kind of support and to have someone pushing you and so invested in you?
yeah, it meant honestly the world, like other people seeing that belief. Like my college coach was so strong for that. And I think that like giving me that vision, like even someone just saying that, like basically manifesting it out there, being like, I think you can. And
Yeah.
like my SNC was like very committed to that as well. And then some of my college teammates, like Rachel Daly, she plays for Aston Villa now. I always had like friends that were a bit older, the team that I was closest to, but Rachel, she's gone on to play WSL. She's like NWSL like star player. Like she was Golden Blue Player of the Year, I think 2 or 3 years old. WSL. So she's like massive. She's gone to big things. And she was like on my bedside every day at the hospital, being like, we'll get through this. And
Yeah.
like, there is the light at the end of the tunnel, which is like a little quote they used to always say for me too. Like there is like a light after the dark.
Yeah, it's really important to have that kind of support, especially when you know that your friends and your family and
Mm,
even the people that you work with and go to school with, that they're
yeah,
there to support you. It helps you so much.
definitely.
But today you're thriving at Sydney
Mhm.
FC. What's been the highlight of your career at Sydney so far?
I think definitely last year winning the grand final and scoring obviously the winning goal was just such a
I was
special
there. It was
moment.
so great.
It was so fun.
Yeah.
Love that.
And how have you found coming to Australia? What's your journey been like for those who don't know you at home?
Yeah, so When I first originally came to Australia, I came to Brisbane and I actually came out to play NPL, which is like crazy if you think about it now.
Yeah.
But shout out to Logan Lightning in Brisbane. They flew me out and I was like, well, if I hate it, it's like a free trip to Australia. But I ended up like loving it. So I played a few years. I also played for Lions FC in Brisbane as well. And then I kind of got picked up to the Roar quite quickly after when Haley Rosso actually went to Everton. The Roar coach at the time, Jake Goodship, had seen me like in a scrimmage, like a weekly, because like back then when they didn't have games every week because there were buys for the uneven teams,
Yeah.
we played them, and then he was like, "Do you want to come training on Monday?" And I was like, "Yes." But actually, back when Mel Andretta, the former assistant national team coach, was there, like I was also training with the team. Then my very first year, and so then I played at Brisbane for a few years, and then came to Sydney.
Which has been so exciting. That's
Yeah,
where I met you.
I know.
But how do you think that the A-League women's has changed in the football landscape of women's football in Australia? How do you think that's changed since you've been here?
Yeah, it's definitely changed so much since I've been there. So my very first like contract, because I was like that mid-season sign, I think I was only with the team for like 2 months. And like it was like February, it was like the end of the season, like February, March. And I was like, oh my gosh, like 2 months, what do you mean? That's like the season's almost over. But the season was very, very short. So I've seen it, I think, go from like something like 12 rounds to now like 22, I think that was this year, which is pretty incredible. So seeing it just grow, I've seen expansion teams. Western United came, Mariners got their team, like potential talk of others. So I think I've seen it grow on that level.
Mhm.
And over the years, like we've obviously seen like more international players are actually coming over to play as well. So I've seen like it just grow in that way, and then also seeing like the other players like go on to become Matildas in the time. So I think women's football definitely has grown like massively since I've been here. And then obviously after the hosting World Cup, I think was such a special moment for the country, but it showed like the boom that can happen when people are invested in women's sport, especially women's football.
Yeah, and one thing that's unique about you that some people also might not know is that you are actually off the field working for Sydney FC as their social media coordinator. How did that opportunity come about?
Well, actually, when I was at Brisbane, I also had this role. So for about 2 years, I also did content for them, like part time.
Mhm.
And when I moved to Sydney last year, I had spoken to the other CEO, and they didn't have the opportunity. But then it came around last year, and they were like, "Oh, we would love to hire, like obviously internally. Are you interested?" And I was like, "Absolutely." So then yeah, so that's how I got the job.
And what's it like juggling professionally playing and working in the media team at your club?
It's obviously a lot, but I love it. I think I'm actually grateful. I feel like I'm busy like a lot, but I feel like I'm grateful for that busy.
Mhm.
And I feel they are very lucky. I'm very lucky that they work around my schedule. And, obviously like I work remotely some days and then a few days in the office, but I'm part-time. So it's like 4 or 5 hours in the office and like before training, if we have training at night. And if we had it in the morning, I would stay like obviously 4 or 5 hours after. And then like more in office on days like where we have to get content. The men's team is like mostly for the men's team is I don't post too much obviously about the women's team. That would be weird. But I do obviously help with like web articles
Yeah.
and interviews and all those things. So it's really good to juggle it. But
How have you found that now doing the content side of things as well? How have you found that the media portrays women's sports? How do you find it's promoted?
yeah, I do think that like the scene of women's football obviously like can be better. Especially I do feel in this country. Um, Even with the Matildas and everything, I still feel that there's a lag. Like sometimes I just feel like we're obviously not given enough visibility. Like last year after the World Cup, it was massive, but you did see the drop off this year in numbers, even at our home games. Obviously, we had a difficult season, but besides that, like last year, like the first game we had like 12,000,
Yeah.
and we didn't see anywhere near those numbers. Like when they didn't push off the back of the World Cup, it kind of
Mhm.
like had a lull almost.
Yeah.
And I feel like obviously like the men are promoted more than we are.
Mhm.
And I think the different ways that they promote it, I feel like this year, I think the league and some of the ways they talked about a lot of the younger players in the league, but like obviously the league has all ages. And I feel like sometimes you're marketing like too much young players, it kind of maybe can hurt the integrity of the league in that way. So I
Yeah.
feel like there's just have to be careful about the wording. But I think that we're trying. I
Yeah,
mean,
of
obviously we
course.
try to give the women the equal show, at least at Sydney, obviously where I'm involved in. But I think that across the women's space in football, across the board, I think it can be more.
Yeah. What do you think can improve?
I think the visibility and the wording around it, like we don't need to promote it like women's football is this entirely different sport. Like it's football. People in Australia love football. They
Mhm.
love soccer,
Yeah.
football, soccer, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But I think like sometimes it's like trying to like promote it like in this like different way that it's like some different product. But realistically, if you're a fan of football and you want to see a good game, like come down to the football tonight. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
and I think Moore Park does actually a great job. They like will post like football tonight and it doesn't like A-Leagues tonight and it doesn't say like women's football or
Yeah.
men's football. Obviously, it is a different product in itself, but I think promoting it as something like that football fans would want to see, you know? Obviously, it's different that it's women, but like it's football, you know?
Yeah.
And it's just football. Like,
It's kind of the way that we, in general, in Australia,
Right.
speak about, and the language that we use to
Right.
speak about women's sports in general. It's almost like sometimes it feels like the way that some people talk about it is as though it's a charity case.
right. It's like, okay, if you want to come,
Like, if you want to come, you can have a free ticket,
right.
but that's not pushing anything forward.
Literally. Even in like Unite Round this year, they had to move it from, it was going to be at Leichhardt, which is one of our home field. But when we
Yeah.
came for our first game of the season, I don't know if you saw, it was atrocious the first game of the season. It was so bad. And like RCO was like, no, we deserve better. And then like he called and they're like, we can't have Unite Round next week on that. It's just like not feasible. And I went to this press conference where I was asked like, oh, do you think like, what if you lose fans by going to Jubilee? Like, it's such a gamble. And I was like, that's a risk we're taking. Like, I don't want to play on dirt. Like on
It's
dirt
pretty much
painted green.
concrete.
It was dirt painted green concrete. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know, like acting like, oh no. And I said, honestly, if the fans will come, you know. But it was like, oh, like women's football sucks already. Like you're gonna have to move it. Who's gonna come? And I was like, people will come.
Yeah.
And if they don't, they can watch it on TV.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
like there's options. But it was like thing like that. Like it's like, oh no, like no one's gonna come even more if you move the fields. And I'm like, okay, that's a problem in itself. If they think they're not gonna come, it's like literally 20 minutes in a different direction from the city base. Like it's
Yeah.
not out in Parramatta or something, you know?
And people also talk a lot about the quality of women's football, and they use the excuse that women's sports in general are not as good as men's
Right.
sports because of the product.
Right.
But when you're given facilities to
Right.
play on like that, which realistically they would never give a men's team that kind of
No, absolutely not.
pitch surface. Like we've seen all of obviously the drama around Suncorp Stadium not being
Right.
fit for players
Definitely.
to play on, and that's at least grass. It kind of it brings forth the question, how do you expect the product to improve when you're providing these kinds of facilities?
I think you hit the head on the nail. Like literally, that's what I said at the press conference. I actually think I used that exact thing. I was like, the product will be better at Jubilee.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, they already complain about women's football.
It's a
You wanna see-
no-brainer.
Yeah. I'm like, what do you think? The ball was bouncing all over God's green earth on Leichhardt. Like, I actually was having to use it I started like running for it and then like spinning because I knew it was going to bounce right over me instead of like me getting there. But it's annoying that you'd have to do things like that, you know?
Yeah. And going back to the social media side of
Mhm.
stuff, how has managing a social media, like how do you find that managing social media for your club, how do you think that's trickled down into the way that you approach social media as an athlete?
Yes, I think that it's kind of made me think that like all of our choices like are seen like in the public eye, and I think it's like making like good decisions like because like we are public figures in a way, like we're not obviously celebrities, but like we're in these spaces. So I feel like I'm just approaching these things with obviously care and how we, you know, take care of ourselves and everything.
Yeah. And how do you personally navigate? Obviously, the internet can be a bit of a
Mm.
negative place. How do you personally navigate the positives and the negatives that come along with being a public figure on the internet?
Definitely. It can be difficult. Obviously, this year we probably it was not a great season for City FC. Obviously after winning last year, obviously we actually resurrected ourselves a little bit
Yeah.
towards the end and didn't finish on the bottom of the table. But like the slack we got was obviously very harsh and some of it like fair. Like, you know, but obviously like we are people, we are individuals, you know, telling us to go back to the kitchen. I had this one guy DM me every week, like, you guys suck, go back to the kitchen.
That's
or like
ridiculous.
the keyboard warriors that are gambling and they're losing millions of dollars or whatever. You know, it seems like they're losing millions overseas in that way. But I just try to ignore it. Like I feel like I am actually good at that. But for some people, some of our younger players, like getting comments on their, you know, pages or DMs, you know, that is very difficult. I just try to weed through the negativity because the outside noise is just outside noise, you know?
Are there any systems in place, for example, specifically at Sydney, are there any systems in place that kind of help you as players navigate through that?
There is, I think, an AI, I think bubble. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's something like that the PFI actually worked. It's meant to like filter those things, and you can sign up, and it will help filter that stuff. I
Mhm.
actually have not done that, but it would be good. I think the younger players have.
Yeah.
But Obviously, and also we have a good support system. Like, I think if we could went to our club manager or talk to anyone. And we also, like, from the admin side, like, especially things like Pride Round, like, we've done a lot of monitoring or just closing off the comments altogether because sometimes people just can't find anything nice to say. So we're
Yeah.
just
And as the
not
old
giving them
saying
the
goes, if you
chance.
have nothing nice to say, don't say anything at all, right?
That's right. They say that. So we just said mute.
Exactly. And for you, how important do you think it is to push the women's game forward? How important is it to continue having a platform for women to tell their stories and to authentically tell their stories?
This is so important because I feel like building player stories is what's gonna get people to games.
Yeah.
Like, it's one thing to see, a team play that you live in the state, but, like, hearing their background, things they've been through, like, everyone is unique, but everyone
Mhm.
has some story that someone can relate to in some sort of way,
Yeah.
whether you've had any injury, like, you can relate to different people, and I think building these profiles and building these stories makes people more relatable, and people love to cheer for people that they feel like, they can relate to.
Yeah.
And it feels like it builds those connections that obviously, like, feel personal,
Mhm.
and you're more likely to support people that, you, like, feel like you can align with in some way. And also building these stories obviously will help further the game, and the more we can further the game and amplify women's sports in general, like, the more fans we'll get, then the more
Yeah.
funding. And it's just like a kind of a domino effect in that way. The more platforms they're given, like, obviously the more the game can grow.
Totally. You've navigated serious injury and now you juggle two huge roles. For some people out there who might be an athlete who it's notorious that as an athlete, your entire personality and your entire being is set around being an athlete. So when you are faced with adversity like an injury
Mhm.
or maybe potentially even a career ending injury, what is your advice to players and athletes and women in general who might be in a place where they're playing sport, but there's also they feel a need to do something else? What advice do you have for them?
I think as big sport is in my life, I feel like my injuries have taught me that although football feels like it's everything, it isn't everything in a
Hmm.
way.
Yeah.
And, like, I have to find joy in, like, the day-to-day things and find passions that I have outside of football. Like, obviously, I have this part-time job, and, like, while it is annoying per se to say that I have to have another job, obviously, it helps me financially.
Yeah.
But I feel like I'm grateful for having these avenues outside of football to shape me, like, so I'm not just Shay the football player, I'm Shay that also does media and that also does like, different collaborations and that can go to events and, like, help other people build their platforms and things like that. I feel like I'm grateful that I've had this experience outside football so that later in life when I transition, and there's so many female athletes talk about this and male athletes in general, I think they struggle more because they don't have to have any side gigs.
Mm.
They don't need, well, they most
They
don't
don't
need
really
any
get
extra.
taught that you
Yeah,
need
they
to
don't
have
need that
something
extra, like,
later on.
yeah, because they don't financially need that. And I feel like while it's frustrating, I think it's great that I've had all these different things that I've coached, that I've done, media and things like that. So I think I would tell people to find passions outside of football
Hmm.
because I think in these darker times, like, there's still things that give you value. And I feel like the tough times in this season that I dealt with personally, I felt like I still had so much value, like, outside. I was still valued in the office, by
Yeah.
friends, like, by people that I was doing media collaborations with, different brands I was working with. I was, wow, like, even though we're having such a terrible season, like, people still, like, wanna see me. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? People
of
still
course.
care. We're still relevant in some way,
People still want to see your beautiful
Like,
face.
thank you.
Of
Stop,
course.
stop.
Of course. Do you think that there's any way or any systems that I mean, I don't know. Are there any systems in place that can support female athletes in that kind of headspace of trying to work out their next move, or do you think that there could be more to be done with that?
I think there definitely can be more to be done with that. I think the RPFA union actually does have a lot of things for people that are retiring, and they always set up workshops and things like that, and they also offer some funding towards like, studying extra and
Hmm.
everything, but I'm not sure if, like, all codes do that. But I do think, getting work experience, like, there could be other opportunities. Like, I do think companies that are interested in, like, because they say women's athletes are more likely to become, have you seen, like, figures or CEOs? Have you seen
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
quote?
Like female people that have women that have played
Right,
sports
right.
have a higher chance of becoming a leader
Yeah,
in
in
the
whatever
world
the
of
field,
business. Yeah.
right. So I feel like, if seeing that fact, I mean, it's actually a statistic. I think that more companies, like, I think should, like, invest and maybe make opportunities for female athletes because, like, knowing the statistics that, like, these women are going through a lot and strong of juggling, because most of us are part-time, not really part-time, but so clearly we're able to juggle, part-time this, because I'm
Yeah.
part-time playing plus part-time work, but we know soccer isn't part-time. So obviously I'm able to handle this like busy schedule. So I think it would be cool if like you saw like more companies that are interested in like amplifying women's sports also started creating opportunities for people transitioning in our sport. I think that'd be a good idea.
Yeah, and looking forward now to, the future, what are some of your personal goals on and off the field?
That's a good question. I think I definitely want to try to keep playing at the highest level I can for the next few years, until I retire. But I think, which I'm not done yet. But
She's not retiring yet.
I'm not
guys,
retiring
don't
yet.
worry.
Don't worry, everyone. But I do think off the field I want to continue expanding into doing more things like outside of like the football space. Like I started working with some of the fashion brands. I would love to work in like that media space for other things like outside of like City FC or outside the club I'm working for.
Yeah.
But I also think I want to start amplifying the voices of women's sports as well. There's like a lot of sporting events coming up. The Asian Women's Cup, I'd love to get involved with that. Even the World Cup back in the States, like wherever I'm gonna be, hopefully still Australia. But like would love to go there and like, be part of it. I think I do want to try to like work with brands to try to, be more in front of the camera than behind the content space. But also stay in the content space. I love creating content and just like seeing things from different perspectives. Because I feel like creating good content sometimes is very hard. And you can see not all media teams are with the same. And I feel like, some people have like a phone camera, which can be good, or you see like the teams have got the full, camera. And I think making sure that women's sports are seen in the right light. But I really want to work in the men's game as well, maybe branch off to different sports as well.
Just investment in media and content and promoting sports.
Yeah. We love sports, obviously, especially women's sports, but
of course.
Sports in general too. I think it would be cool, obviously, doing some, like obviously working in the men's space more as well.
Yeah, I love that. This season on Momentum, we are putting together our playbook to success. So I've been asking all of our guests to give me their one holy grail piece of advice. So it could be a beauty hack, it could be a piece of professional advice, sporting advice, whatever is your holy grail piece of advice that guarantees success. What would that be? That's a big question.
This is the big question. The other one was easy. I think I'm gonna go back to where I was talking about compartment syndrome. And I think it's working on like that mental aspect. There's a million, you can train in the gym, you can take a million shots, but I think it's the personal work. And I think it's perfecting that inner drive and like actually recognizing that, your mindset is everything. So I think making sure your mindset is in a healthy space and you're able to focus on what you need to focus on and worry about your drive, not everyone else's drive, like working within. I think it's the personal work is the best thing for success. And I think the mental game of life is everything, you know?
Absolutely.
And I would say to someone like, make sure your mindset is good. Practice gratitude. I write gratitude and affirmations.
Gratitude journals.
I have a gratitude journal. Yes. I write gratitude and affirmations every morning.
I love that so much. And honestly, guys,
and sometimes at night if I'm able to. No, manifest. No, I'm literally saying it like
it works.
It does.
It works.
It does. I do it all the time.
Oh, well, we're going to wrap there before we start talking about our manifestation rituals.
That's a whole long story.
Thank you so much, Shea, for joining me today. It's been so great to hear your story and just to hear how well you're doing. And it's just really great to see, especially as a friend. Thank you to everyone at home for keeping up with us here at Momentum. You can catch us anywhere you get your podcasts and, of course, on Binge. Keep up with us on socials at The Momentum Show. I've been Kat Sasso, and I'll see you next time.